So hello everyone and welcome to the ScreenSkills Select RTS Scotland Industry Insight session on roles in broadcast engineering. My name is Victoria Tracey, Accreditation Programme Manager at ScreenSkills. Today we will be delving into the broadcast engineering department with Scottish-based industry practitioners at different stages in their careers, discussing their current roles and previous projects they've worked on. Please note that we will be recording this session. There will be a Q&A towards the end of the session, so please submit any questions you have via the Q&A feature. It would be helpful if you could mention who the question is for when submitting these. The questions we put to the panel during the last 15 minutes of the session. ScreenSkills is the national skills body for the screen industries. We provide targeted support to retain and build a skilled and inclusive workforce critical to the screen industry's global success. We work across the UK to ensure that film, TV, visual effects, animation and games have the skills and talent they need. We identify skills gaps and shortages across the screen industries, support and quality market education and training, and offer professional development opportunities in screen. I manage the ScreenSkills Select endorsement scheme, which endorses and enhances screen courses that develop industry-ready students. By identifying the UK's most industry-focused courses, we enabled employers to recruit the best talent. The Royal Television Society for Scotland is an educational charity promoting the art, science and craft of television and schedule informative events all year round on a host of different topics, from their annual Scotland Awards and Student Awards to the prestigious Campbell Swinton Lectures, plus other events relevant to Scotland's television industry featuring Scottish production teams and programmes, all tackling issues impacting television production and broadcast in Scotland. So let me hand you over to Lee Davison, who is Associate Head of Department for Film and Media and course leader for the BSc ONS Live Event Technology course at Solent University, Southampton. He will be facilitating the session and we will introduce you to each of the industry speakers. I really hope you're going to enjoy this session. Just to let you know, which we're going to put in the chat, we have a really good broadcast engineering careers map, which shows you all the job roles and profiles. So please have a look at that as well. So thank you very much. So over to Lee.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. As we said, my name is Lee Davison. I'm a course leader of Live Event Technology, which is broadly a broadcast engineering kind of focused course. I'm the course leader for Media Technology, which is a small group that kind of has degrees in that area generally over history. And so we're very involved with getting graduates into broadcast engineering roles, basically, from down south. So Solent University is down in Southampton, so we're about as far away from Scotland as we can still be and still be in the same kind of country, or still within Britain. Yeah, my other role, I've got two hats that I wear. The other one is as the Associate Head of the Department of Film and Media, which is a relatively new change for us here at Solent. A new department, and my role within that is to do with recruitment, so trying to get young people involved in this stuff, which is a key problem we have inside the broadcast sector, and it's also about curriculum enhancement, so trying to put things into the curriculum that are, you know, interesting and useful to young people. So if we can go through our panelists that we have here today, if you could just give who you are and what your current job role is, would be really useful. So if we can start with Gareth, if that's possible.
Hi everyone, my name is Gareth Gordon. I am the Chief Technical Officer at QTV in Glasgow.
Okay, and Morag.
Hi, I'm Morag McIntosh. I am Solution Lead for studio automation for the BBC. So I run the team that looks after all the studio automation systems across the BBC.
Okay, and Jonas.
Hi, my name is Jonas Krugermees, and I'm a Junior Systems Engineer. I've just graduated off the apprenticeship scheme in Scotland.
Okay, perfect. So I guess one of the sort of outcomes of this should really be to sort of demystify this industry. Most of the people that are in this panel or watching this panel at the moment are trying to work out where they might fit within the industry or what the roles might be, how they can sort of adapt and enhance their skills so that they can slot into something that they want to do as a job. So if you could, kind of one by one, I suppose, give an indication of what your current job is like, what it's like and what you do every day, basically what a typical day looks like. So if we go in the same order, that'd be useful.
Sure. So I've graduated up from being an apprentice at the BBC back in 2003, where I started at the same time as Morag here, and was at the BBC for 13 years, and then moved into freelancing for 6 years. And then mid-pandemic, when I found myself painfully unemployed, I found myself with an offer of a job at a very small streaming company at QTV, where I took the role of head of engineering. And that role was heavily operational, helping them sort of graduate from being a streaming, live stream, small 1-2 camera operation for multiple sports to full broadcast facilities, still on a smaller scale, but to tackle the Scottish Premiership and to create a remote operation model for all of their OBs. Over the course of that first year, I sort of proved myself that I was further ahead in my understanding of broadcast facilities, and took the role of Chief Technical Officer. And that appointment has seen me continue to be operational up until the last sort of 9 months, where the company has grown from the sort of small 13-person operation that it was when I first started in 2020 to now 50 members of staff. And our turnover has increased by 5 times in that 18-month period. And my role is now much more strategic. I'm working with ScreenSkills Scotland and RTS and BBC Studio Works, developing a training program for graduates and people changing careers. But it's been an interesting process moving from being an engineer and always complaining about the strategic problems that companies have, to now being the person who's trying to exact strategic plans for training, development, and growth of a company that has prided itself on its sort of technical agility, and that's a difficult thing. Becomes a more and more difficult thing to balance the bigger a company gets.
Okay, wonderful. Morag?
Yeah, so my background was, as Gareth said, I started as a BBC trainee at the same time as Gareth. And prior to that, I'd worked in technical theatre, doing lighting design and stage management and that sort of thing, which led to getting accepted on the BBC traineeship. And I was a trainee vision mixer and then a staff vision mixer director for a number of years. I then went freelance and was working across the industry for broadcasters in the UK, but also broadcasters overseas as well. And then studio automation came along at the BBC, who were one of my biggest employers, and I could see what a huge shift it was going to create in the BBC, you know, in terms of gallery crewing models and the sort of work that I did. So as a vision mixer, the automation was going to pick up some of that work. And as a director, it was going to completely change how directors work, in multi-camera directors work in television. So I tried to get ahead of the game and started working for the BBC as their automation implementation person. I was doing that as a freelance contractor for a while. And then the BBC moved their headquarters in London, and I was full-time moving BBC News onto a studio automation system called Mossart. And I worked in that capacity for lots of broadcasters, looking after their Mossart installs for a number of years. And then, much like with Gareth, COVID came along. There was the opportunity of a staff job at the BBC, and it was framed as a way of really helping the BBC to strategize how they're going to use studio automation ongoing, and how gallery models of the future will use automation in, obviously, conjunction with how real people are using the automation to create all of our content. So for me, that was a real opportunity to help the BBC shape how we make content today and how we're going to make content tomorrow, and what that content looks like and how we get it to our audiences. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I am. And I lead a team of automation specialists, and our day is wildly varies day to day. So for example, this morning I started the morning because one of our robot cameras on the 6 o'clock news last night was going walkabout, and we were trying to get to the bottom of why that was happening and how to stop it happening for the 6 o'clock news tonight. And the 6 is one of our most significant parts of output, so I was putting quite a lot of time into that. So my day is split between fault resolution. I don't chase the faults myself anymore, but my team does, so managing that and making sure we're looking in the right places. We look after feature requests, so if a program we want to do a new stand-up or new weather position, or we want some new music, or all of the lots and lots of things that brands might want to do, we look after that. We look after over 40 fully automated studios, over 100 brands, and over 1,000 hours of content per day. So the day is split between that kind of nitty gritty and then the big picture stuff. How are we going to be using our systems in the future? What is our roadmap, both for the next couple of months and for the next couple of years? And that's what I look after.
Awesome. Sounds like proper engineering stuff then, basically. Yeah. Cool. And Jonas?
Hi. I think my career background will be much shorter, but so just before, or as the pandemic was starting, I had finished up my A-levels and had a bit of experience before that in kind of theatre, sound and light by volunteering at a local community theatre. And I'd applied to various unis, but also applied to the BBC apprenticeship scheme and was fortunate enough to get that. So for the past 3 years, I've been working up through the degree and doing various placements around BBC Scotland, gaining experience. And I graduated off of that 3-year scheme last summer and moved into a role in a team called the PTD team in Scotland, Production Technology Development, where we sort of looked at developing new small systems and technologies for BBC Scotland. And that team's now morphed and my role's shifted. So I'm now a junior systems engineer in a sort of central team. And so my day-to-day work is much more project focused, managing, I say managing, like balancing time between a couple of projects that are ongoing, which largely deals with following up kind of manufacturers, trying to understand if their products are suitable for a new system that we want to build, or if there's bugs or issues or features that we want, then trying to raise that with manufacturers, designing systems and creating documentation for that, and sort of getting in real hands-on nitty-gritty implementation details, testing things, and actually building and installing systems, which for me I think is the most fun bit. It's typically a sort of 9 to 5 office job, and you see I'm in the office now, so I try to get in, do as much as I can hands-on in person.
Okay, awesome. You mentioned COVID, obviously, and I think these kind of sessions always have a little COVID section, don't they? Everyone's kind of mentioned it a little bit. So Jonas, I mean, was there a real struggle with the couple of years that you had within education during COVID? Do you feel sort of a little bit behind or disadvantaged by that, or did it work out okay?
I think I've been quite fortunate in kind of managing to ride the tail end. My first year of university was fully online pretty much, other than I think a week towards the end where we got in and managed to cram in a bunch of labs, which was difficult. And I think that, the university was trying to adapt to delivering content remotely. And so the sessions, it varied a lot, the quality of modules, whether the lecturer really managed to move content to that kind of delivery or not. But since then, for the last 2 years of my scheme, it's been much, much more in person. And as restrictions have lifted, I managed to get in and get a lot of practical experience. So I think I've managed to kind of catch the tail end, and it hasn't impacted things too much.
Okay, good. The reason I ask really is that, again, people that are in this call and watching this will be people that are learning, and it will have impacted them at some point in their journey. And I think it's always on people's minds a little bit when they come to, do I feel a little bit disadvantaged as opposed to, or in relation to those that weren't as impacted. And I think it's one of those things where with the right kind of attitude and you can pull through it quite happily, if you know what I mean. And I think there is an acknowledgement that a certain section of the young people these days are impacted by it, and we have to kind of acknowledge it and keep it in mind.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so can you guys then give me some examples of kind of productions that you've been involved with? The roles don't necessarily fit directly with specific productions, but maybe you have some that you can give us as examples. I guess we'll go in the same order again, if that's okay.
Sure thing. So I guess I have a few flagship things of which I'm very proud. I did 10 years working at Glastonbury as vision supervisor, working on initially the John Peel stage, then graduating up to the West Holt stage, and then sort of rounded out my time at the other stage, so second sort of main stage at Glastonbury, and really music events. My sort of growing up, I was in bands, and as a 20-something at uni, my time was spent going to gigs or performing in music sort of acts. So when I found a job that was nerdy and geeky and was also creative, it was a really sort of a dream come true. And to be able to then go to these sort of massive events, be behind the fence and see how it's all going together. I had a lovely moment of in 2006, I did my first Tea in the Park when The Prodigy headlined, and I got to meet the band after they performed. But it was in 1994, sitting watching Glastonbury and The Prodigy headlining on my small sort of CRT TV in my room as a teenager, going, oh my God, that's somebody's job. That's what I want to do. And it was my voyage and my journey. And then to sort of have that circular moment of having realized that it was a really big moment. Yeah, we worked on lots of big events, but Champions League final at Cardiff was a really big supervisor for the output of that. Try to think what else. The Les Miserables 25th anniversary, the O2. And then, yeah, I've worked on sitcoms and game shows. I've been around the world and worked on sporting events and done various things. So I really have been incredibly fortunate to have found a job I didn't know existed just through the BBC's recruitment process. And then being fortunate enough to find an aptitude for something that I really like. I would spend every day I could in a studio making pictures look nice, and also being interested in how it all went together has really served me well as my career has progressed. The relationships I've made doing those big events, and the sort of profile that you create for yourself when you do one event that leads to other events really is exciting. And then you end up in weird scenarios. Like from doing a Tea in the Park, I ended up being invited to do a couple of Land Rover launch events, and ended up in a weird woodland estate in Birmingham with Bear Grylls being helicoptered onto a Lego replica of Tower Bridge, which was the biggest Lego model ever made. Ben, the sailor, the gold medal sailor, sailing through the Tower Bridge on a Lego replica of his Olympic boat, and then I can't remember which royal jumping on a horse over the bonnet of a Land Rover, all for a 3-minute promo of the new Land Rover. And it was 4 days of setting this thing up, and then as it happened, just sort of shaking my head in disbelief at the oddity of it all. But yeah, it's been really been a fun career. And now it's in this different role. We were involved in the procession after the death of the Queen, and we were, we had problems acquiring radio cameras, and we ended up deploying 5G wireless technology for its first use on live TV. And 2 days prior, we were at IBC showcasing it as a sort of test bed, and then it was being broadcast to 600 million people with no testing time. So yeah, I've had a great career so far, and there's lots to enjoy.
Yeah, I think one of the things to state about the broadcast industry is that it's so diverse. There's so many things you can end up doing. I'm always particularly jealous of all of our graduates when they go out. They do incredibly interesting things all around the world. So yeah, it's there's a lot to do out there, as it turns out. Have you got any interesting examples, Maureen?
Yeah, it's so much like with Gareth, I got right into doing music as soon as I possibly could when I first started vision mixing. So lots of the examples of the same big music festivals like Transmit, Tea in the Park, Reading Festival, Glasgow, Radio 1 Big Weekend, and all those sorts of things, and other festivals that are a bit more niche, like folk festivals, the Blast Festival, Trads, etc. And then I got into doing classical music as well. So I still vision mix the proms. I used to do, I'm not allowed to do anymore because I'm now BBC staff, but Royal Opera House, English National Opera, and any kind of any BBC classical gigs that come along. I do a lot of that, and I now direct BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra output, which because we use studio automation to do streams there, so that's kind of a convergence of lots of different strands of worlds that I've operated in, and BBC events as well. So big high profile stuff like the events following the death of the Queen, state opening of Parliament, other state funerals and weddings and things like that. And I've done a lot of children's TV and quiz shows and that sort of thing as well. And the thing that I really love, and I think probably events, but music to an extent, are the real kind of the place that I find that this element shines through, is you realise what a small part of the system you are, but also how without the work that you're doing, if you don't provide that to a standard, everything falls down. Just like if the person sitting next to you doesn't provide their work to the same standard, everything will fall down. So you are part of this huge system and this huge machine, and there's people all over the country working together and doing their roles to a high spec, and often under a lot of pressure when it comes to these big events. And everyone is doing something different. There's no duplication of effort because there's no money for that. And everyone has to do their role specifically correct, and everything comes together. And that's a really satisfying feeling, just knowing how big of a system and how big of a machine it is. And when it all works, that is just a wonderful thing.
Excellent. So yeah, everyone's part of a chain, I guess, and you don't want to be the weakest part of that chain. So I guess you've got to keep it to a standard that exceeds that. And Jonas, I know we didn't really explicitly say it earlier with your introduction, but you've graduated in the summer, wasn't it?
Yes, last summer.
So not going to be as an extensive catalogue of things that you've been up to, but are there any things that you've been up to at the moment that are sort of flagship events for you so far?
Yeah, there's a few things I'd like to mention. So throughout most of my placements on the apprenticeship and now my current role, it's been a lot, it's sort of double behind the scenes. I've not done a lot of operational work, but it's been more systems maintenance and design and installation. So one project I did, not a production I was involved in, but a project during my apprenticeship was also for the Scottish Symphony Orchestra in City Halls, and the kind of automation system and the vision system that Morag mentioned before. I was involved in actually installing that into the equipment racks and wiring it all up and testing that, which is really cool. And it's now used reasonably frequently to stream out the orchestra performances for people to watch online. And a big event that I was really lucky to get involved with, and it's kind of a fortunate timing thing. Just as I was finishing my dissertation, I, working in the sort of PTT team in Scotland, got asked by the CNI team, Connectivity and Innovation, in London, to come down with another of my fellow Scottish engineers to work on the coronation. And specifically, we were looking at using IP, so kind of computer networks, IP technology to contribute the feeds from the coronation broadcast, the OB there, out to the BBC's headquarters. So lots of kind of rack mount encoders and networks and setting up switches and routers and stuff to get the main UHD feed of the output back to base where it's broadcast out to iPlayer, but also managing lots of feeds in between sites. So at like the QE2 or along the Mall or various other locations around London that were involved in that broadcast, you know, getting video back and forth between them, video and audio reliably over computer networks. So that was really interesting as well.
Excellent, thank you. I've actually, I taught a bit of Cisco stuff in my time at the university actually, and those kind of computing skills are obviously big in the industry and getting bigger really as time goes on.
Yeah, really massive. I mean, throughout the apprenticeship, I'd say just about half of my modules were kind of IT and computer network related. There was a big focus on IP technologies. And it's been, in my role, really, really useful to have those skills.
Yeah, certainly. And I always said when it comes to the IT guys or the sort of computer science guys that I was teaching, I'd always said, you know, our job is quite similar to yours, but it's just much more interesting. So while we're on the subject of technology, actually, I'll have this as a kind of open question to everybody if anybody wants to chip in or chime in on this. Technology is obviously, you don't have to be particularly focused as a broadcast engineer on technology or the movement of technology, but it impacts what we do quite a lot. And I think everybody on this call here is quite focused on the tech side of things. You do get broadcast engineering roles that are more operational, so you're using equipment and not really as concerned with the way that the wind is blowing. But you know, as people that are in the forefront of tech and trying to move things forward and trying to do new and interesting things with broadcast and this kind of thing, are there any technologies that are floating about or just on the horizon that you can see that you're particularly interested in without anything being too commercially sensitive?
I can talk about that. So you can see Gareth has got something to say as well. I think it'll be the same thing probably. Is cloud-based tech, software as a service, and really what the industry does with AI. And no one knows. I've been to lots of conferences recently. There are various places where AI is being used to a very, very minor and safe degree. And I think kind of worldwide on a global level, no one's quite sure how we do that. And we know that it's going to involve better management of data. Media companies and broadcasters are historically very bad at managing our data. And the example I was given recently was ITV found a recording of the Monty Python team's their first piece that they made upstream of making Monty Python. They found it in the basement. It'd just been sitting there for 50 years with the wrong label on it, and that carries through to now. And similarly, at the BBC, we found a tape which had some Beatles archive footage on there, and again mislabeled, and that carries through to now. So we need to get better at using data, and from how we do that is how we'll move into AI.
Yeah, wonderful. Gareth, you got something on that
one? I think following on from what Morag's saying, cloud is an interesting one. I think it seems it's on the tip of everyone's tongue and everyone's talking about how they can use it. And everyone wants to charge us a fortune to move to software, and then you never own a tangible asset. So it's an interesting one. And I think the fact that there hasn't been the uptake so far points to the fact that the pricing model is not correct. So for the time being, I think baseband will continue to be the prevalent choice for broadcasters, especially in the sort of lower tiers. But speaking of AI, it's something I've spent a lot of time looking at. We've had a number of tenders for tier 1 broadcasters in the last year, and with the move to remote and the sort of looking at the sustainability of the industry, is going to force people to look to multi-skill their staff, so that one person is not turning up to do one job, it's multiple jobs and multiple responsibilities on site. But also looking to AI to reduce the requirement. Now, there's a product called Mix Air by Salsa Sound. If anyone's interested in sound technology, I highly recommend that you watch Rob Oldfield's lectures that are available on YouTube. It's an utterly fascinating and very, very nerdy product that got me very excited, and I spent 2 hours standing chatting to him at IBC and about the possibilities for it. But basically, it's working in a sort of sonar effect. So it's processing all the, you sort of map the mics out into different spaces on a football pitch, and then it calculates the time differentials between the impact that it hears on each microphone, and then refers to a huge sound library and uses it as a trigger. So it overlays the sound of a good football being kicked. So as the ball moves further away from the mics into the center of the pitch, it keeps that layer. Now that can be for 6 microphones, or it can be for 200 microphones, and they were using it in parallel with the World Cup final as a demonstration, although it wasn't the mix that went out. But it's literally drop-down menus of, this is Dolby Atmos now, or it's a mono mix, or it's, and it can be doing that for multiple matches simultaneously. So for us, when we're looking at something like the Scottish Premiership, and we have 5 simultaneous matches, there isn't the budget in there to have 5 sound supervisors and multiple assistants out. But if someone can be responsible for putting the mics out in the morning at the same time as they're putting out other kit, and then all of those feeds are brought back in embedded video paths, and we put it into a PC, and it's doing 5 simultaneous mixes on one license, it's clear to see it's enhancing the product that we have. We're able to give our clients, who are then able to sell it on for a fraction of the cost that it would. Now, I'm not for taking other people's jobs away at all, but I think it's a good thing to all be cognizant of how radically the industry has to change, because for all of the perks and enjoyments of the job, it is incredibly wasteful at almost every level, and particularly up in the higher echelons. Like, everybody has one job, and you'll often see a vision engineer walking past you with one cable in their hand, and then having a cup of tea for 4 hours. Or multi-skilling is absolutely the way that the industry becomes sustainable, and looking to using technology to enhance that is also the path.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's an interesting insight in terms of, I mean, from my perspective, being somebody that, is attempting to educate people to the best of our ability, that's the difficulty in a lot of ways. There's so much of, oh, this is everything, I think traditionally, at least prior, degrees and things would just be like, oh, you just focus on audio, or just focus on this or that. But now it's like, you have to be a computer scientist and an audio technician and understand all these different elements to it. So that's a really good insight in terms of what's important. And I think the thing about cloud is really important too. We've had so much of a push in my direction, at least, in terms of cloud skills and how often people are interacting with the cloud and that kind of thing. And I've seen lots of companies that are fully focused, or moving down the cloud route entirely. And I worry about that kind of on-prem versus off-prem balance and where the money's going, kind of thing. So definitely interesting to see a more kind of lukewarm approach to jumping directly on the cloud bandwagon. Cool. Jonas, do you have anything to add for that one, or either way?
I think cloud is very heavily mentioned, and it is a significant direction that the industry is moving in. But when you're dealing with broadcast, you're going out to some site, you aren't in the cloud on your site, you're at a location, So if you're wanting to use cloud technologies, you need to get your signals up and down and back and forth. So more generally, the kind of understanding of how the internet and computer networks work, and understanding, media, video and audio signals and the challenges of latency and encoding is really, really important for easing the transition from current systems into more cloud-centric or cloud-native models, which a lot of people are very keen to do.
Okay, wonderful. I'll give you an opportunity to talk about your third year project. As I said before the call, I had a bit of I've seen it and I thought it was a really good project. So could you give a little background of what you worked on as part of your degree coming through?
Sure. So for my final year project, it was a 3-month period where I worked on a placement, so at the BBC, but whilst doing my academic dissertation. And the project that I was working on was investigating the use of private 5G networks for outside broadcasting. So it's exactly that kind of idea of, if you're out on a location and you're trying to gather all your signals together and get them back to base, not necessarily the cloud, but just over the internet, maybe to another central operation. How feasible is that? How is the technology currently? Is this more, a far distant future idea, or is some of that currently implementable? And the sort of main finding of that was that for remote production, for low latency outside broadcasts, the technology just isn't ready. But for the kind of traditional model of like journalism and remote contribution, which is fairly well established, if you've got some journalist out in the field with a camera and some backpack device on the back, like a WMT live view or something, that's streaming video over public mobile networks, that's been used for years and years, and people understand that. So there's definitely already currently potential for private or kind of self-managed mobile networks to be used for higher latency contribution, if not for remote production.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. So I guess sort of spinning on this idea of technology a little bit, and again, an open question to anyone. Anyone can jump in on this one. Would you describe there being skills gaps in your sector? Gareth?
Yes, there absolutely is. It's something we're painfully aware of. We are now responsible for delivering 7 OBs in Scotland every week, following the football season and some rugby and other events. There is a shortage of skilled camera ops. There is a shortage of engineers. There is a shortage of replay operators. There's a shortage of audio assistants and a shortage of sound supervisors, shortage of vision mixers. Pretty much at every facet of the industry has dwindled. There has been, it's something. So when I was a vision supervisor at BBC Scotland, it was something that I was painfully aware of as I took on more and more responsibility in a department that had an aging workforce and was dependent on an aging freelance community. And that freelance community has not really been refreshed. It's something we're working incredibly hard on. And we have a traineeship at the moment, which was done in joint with ScreenSkills Scotland, NFTS, BBC Studio Works. But due to the state of the industry at the moment, that traineeship was 6 placements and was supposed to be split 3 and 3 between us and BBC Studio Works, but they've not got any work to support them having those trainees at the moment. So we now have 6 trainees, and with the best will in the world, that is an awful lot to give focused time. So we will endeavour to fill that time as best we can and give people opportunities, and hopefully those people will then enter the freelance market and be able to work at BBC and other opportunities. One of the biggest problems that we have in Scotland is a sustaining industry, and a part of the issue with the skills shortage is there hasn't been enough work in Scotland to sustain the amount of people who want to do it as a job, and so they either lose interest or they move to London or wherever, or Manchester, to where there is a greater volume of work. And what has been one of the driving factors of me joining QTV was that I had an opportunity to provide stepping stones for another generation of engineers and operators. So what we are fortunate to be able to do, having grown up from being a single camera streaming service for fringe sporting events, we've retained that work while also then aspiring to punch up and do delivery and provide facilities for companies like World Archery and BBC and Viaplay and others. So we now have a spectrum of work that is a path for people to come through. So that is the thing that is missing from tier one broadcasters. Morag and I, Morag less than me, because Morag's much more adept at her job than I was when I first started. I sat watching people for 3 years before I ever put hands on any of the kit, because there's such high risk involved with that type of programming, even to this sort of, probably was doing Reporting Scotland and things like that, which is sort of is as low tier as BBC has available for people to work on, but it's still done in an incredibly managed and risk averse way, where we have the opportunity to provide people with red light experience and working on live productions that are slightly lower risk is an opportunity for people to gather experience and confidence in the industry across a broad spectrum of roles. What's difficult is then ingratiating ourselves as a community and it becoming a cohesive industry. So I'm sort of leaning on my ties to BBC Scotland and to Sky Sports and to other OB companies that I've worked with over my 20 years to try and build a trust and relationship that we are all better if we work together to develop skills. Some people will end up at different places, and that is part of the deal. But also a lot of people will come away from experiences, whether it's a year-long traineeship or just getting the opportunity to shadow, and then us reaching out and saying, we've met this person, we think they're really good, you should give them a chance as well, and trying to build like a self-sustaining legacy that is open book. It avoids the this is my job, nobody gets to do it mentality, which is pervasive, particularly in Scotland, and give people a chance to do the job, and for it to be accessible not only to pale male stale like me, but to all communities. And that is a massive challenge, and I keep saying particularly in Scotland. Scotland has a serious lack of diversity and opportunity for people who aren't male and white, and that is a challenge. That but there are people, and part of our drive has shown that there are communities there that are desperate to find a way in. It's just you can only be what you can see, and it isn't visible. So it has to be a collaborative effect, and it has to be everyone working together for the same aim, and to trust that it is beneficial to us all. So yeah, the skills gap is a difficult thing to address, but it has to be done collaboratively.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in other industries, to be quite frank, but I do commend, at least more recently, the broadcast sector for its approach and its attempt to lessen that sort of gap in terms of diversity and gender distribution. And there's a lot of work happening, at least at sort of university level, to make sure that we're trying to improve that. It's one of our stated goals that we have to do as a course when we're trying to put courses on, basically improve the gender and diversity gaps that exist. That was going to be one of my questions, and I guess why we're here actually. You've kind of painted some of the picture there. Has anyone got anything else to add in terms of of how that looks in terms of the people you work with? Do they all look like you, or do they look different?
The BBC is historically, stereotypically, in terms of engineering, male, middle-aged, or headed for retirement and white. But the BBC is very specifically very heavy on really impressing a diverse approach when it comes to recruitment. So we actively, certainly within the automation team, we run programs where we actively try to catch the attention of people from a wide range of backgrounds from across the corporation, from different places. The BBC is huge, and you can, if you can capture the imagination of someone working in an area that they never thought they would work in studio automation, that's all the better, because what we find is our team is we want diversity, and we want a range of personalities, and we want a range of backgrounds and experience, and that's professional experience and life experience, and all of that comes into making the best teams. So if you look at the BBC right now as a snapshot, you would see a non-diverse picture, but if you look at where we're trying to get to, that picture is very different.
Thank you for that. Like I say, there is a lot of work going on. I think the students that are coming and feeding in, I think over time are slowly improving. Our cohorts have been more and more female over the past kind of 5 years or so, actually. So there is a lot of hope, I think, in terms of that. And if there are people on this call that are interested to get into the field and they look a bit different to white and male, then I think going forward we're going to see a lot more improvement in that respect. So it's definitely not something that I would be nervous of. Hopefully, at least, we can improve that over time. Okay, so we've in this call here, we've got a little bit of a monoculture in terms of where people have come from to get into the industry. So I guess the question needs to be slightly tweaked in terms of how people that work with you, how did they get into the industry? I guess is one question I could ask. And feel free to jump in with this one.
I'll let you go, Morag. You go.
So this is less about people who I work with, because everyone is from a very wide range of backgrounds in my team, and this is more about how I would advise people coming into the industry now, where the landscape is very different even to what it was 5 or 10 years ago. And the advice I would get to anyone who wants to work in TV now is to embrace all of the options for content creation that are already right there at your fingertips, and get involved in pet projects which are broadcast related. So TikTok, YouTube channels, look at things like vMix and free you can get free trials of a huge range of software, either for short periods of time, or you can get them ongoing if you're not actually using them for broadcast. Do streaming if you want to do streaming, get into editing. Any of these things is what will set you ahead of other people when a recruiter is looking at what you could bring to their organization. And don't just look at broadcast as kind of linear TV. Broadcast is now everything. I mean, the BBC itself is moving towards streaming, and we are a dinosaur, and we are moving towards, we have a really heavy emphasis in moving away from only providing linear television into providing a really large amount more content via streams. But I was at a conference the other day where there was someone talking from Peloton, the bike fitness company, who are now technically a broadcaster, because they are broadcasting to exercise bikes all over people's living rooms around the country. So it can seem really intimidating to try to get into a big broadcaster, because it feels like the BBC's been established for such a long history that actually trying to pick up that knowledge seems really overwhelming, but it's not. The tech is moving fast. If you can get to grips with the tech now, that's what will stand you in good stead in the years to come.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And Gareth, you were about to jump in. Yep, go for it.
Yeah. So we've got an interesting sort of case study in terms of diversity of backgrounds, because our focus has been on sport and particularly football. We have been very attractive to diverse backgrounds in terms of the sort of the general roles of, like, I went to uni and I did this, and then I worked at the BBC. Doesn't really work here. And we've got kids who are, I say kids, they're not kids. We've got young adults who are just love football, and actually they consume so much of it that their understanding of the editorial requirements of top-end broadcasters is very acute. And so when you bring them in and you explain the sort of fundamentals of what we're doing, and particularly, Morag mentioned vMix. vMix is an incredible bit of software that frankly blew my mind apart when I walked into QTV in 2020 and I watched a 21-year-old produce a 4-camera football match, do all of the sound mix, put their own graphics on and do their replays by themselves, whereas that would have been 8 people's jobs at the BBC. And these kids were just doing it, and there's a row of desks with them all producing club TV for Celtic, for Ross County, for Hibs and Hearts, and all simultaneously, and they're just doing it like it's nothing, and unfazed by it. And it was really a sort of light bulb moment for me of just how much could be achievable if people just have a passion for the job. So Morag's absolutely right. There is a big bit of setting yourself apart in terms of the job market, and she's saying it's not changed that much, or it's changed a lot in 5 years. But the example I gave in my application to the BBC was we were trying to create a bit of music, me and my friends, and we didn't have a drum kit, but we made a sort of kick drum sound by strapping a bottle of water on the inside of a wardrobe and miking the other side and slamming it against it and then sampling it. And we built a whole drum kit doing things like that. And I sort of detailed that in my job. And that was when I spoke to my sort of line manager, and I said, what was it that stood out? And she's like, it was that bit. It was, everything else was fine and everything, but it was this bit, this creative element that you were doing this, and this was your hobby. That, and again, what Morag's saying is about if this is something that you want to do it anyway. Be passionate about it, create your own content, and build the skills yourself. It goes a long way, because even in your whatever stage you go to, which is your first job in the industry, it will be a huge jump from whatever you're doing at home, because you're being forced to work to somebody else's ideals. But if you have your own voice or your own vision of what it is that you want to do, it gives you a starting point. And yeah, so vMix is absolutely something that you should all be looking into for free trials. DaVinci is a free download, like an incredible bit of software. Morag and I produced a music video using free DaVinci, trading files and editing remotely during the pandemic. But it's also has grading capability and sound mix in it. What I do, the sort of vision engineering and balancing cameras, grading is your pathway to being able to do that. So racking cameras is a sort of live grading function that is done as an engineer. But yeah, just do it because you love it, and that speaks volumes to an employer. If someone comes into me and says, "Oh, I've been editing on Premiere Pro for 2 years on my own, and could I shadow a shift?" There's no question they're coming in to shadow a shift. And I think the other thing as well is companies like it's difficult. Companies like the BBC are difficult to get into. They have a huge process but if you meet somebody and you're saying they're from the industry and you're interested in what they have to say, then make the contact and badger them to get opportunities to follow them around for a day or even just have a conversation. And now I always say this, like, if people give me a card or get my email and they email me and I don't reply straight away, that's my bad. but just keep badgering me because I will respond, because I'm a soft touch really. But it really, like, people are really busy in the industry, and particularly leaders in industry are the types of people that you meet when you're out at like trade shows or whatever. But if you're passionate and you want it, then you have to lean on whatever contact you get. It's a tough industry to break into, but all you need is one day, and then you can set yourself apart from others and get that opportunity to come back again.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I really like that example of the thing that sets you apart. And I always encourage, again, with my students to, like, when they come in the door, I say, you're all a bunch of nerds. Like, that's what you are. You're all nerdy in something. And that little thing that you like will be the thing that kind of sets you apart, gets you a job. It was an interesting parallel. When I did my interview for when I came to work at the university, I was messing about portabilizing games consoles. And I put that in my I had a little booklet of things I hack with and play with, and that's the kind of thing that sets you apart. And just recently we've gotten into virtual production at Solent, so all of a sudden all these kind of games skills that I've, my wasted youth is suddenly not so wasted with all these game skills that are coming about, and playing with game engines and writing small bits of code and things like that. So yeah, I mean, for the young people in the audience, whatever your particular niche is, this is an industry where you can do that kind of thing. Like, you can play with games, you can play with audio and video, music, and all this kind of stuff. It all comes into it in some way, which I think is one of the reasons I love my job so much, basically. Okay, just we're running on a little bit. We should get into the Q&A in just a second, but there's not that many that have come through yet. So if there's people out there that have a question, any question, we're very open to take anything you want to ask. Nothing's a silly question, so please put those in there if you've got something coming up. But just before we head into that, Morag, you recently won a Rise Award, so congratulations on that. Very well done. Can you, in terms of trying to improve the kind of gender and diversity picture of the industry, Rise have done some terrific work in the past few years. Can you give a bit of detail on what they get up to and what your award was all about?
Yeah, so Rise are an international organisation. You have a Rise company in the UK, but there's also one in France, Australia, the States, etc. So there are versions of Rise all around the world. They are a global organisation, and they champion women in the broadcast industries, and they do that via a variety of means. The really powerful thing that they do is they get every 6 months they get a group of women who are more senior in the industry and assign them as mentors to a group of women who have some direction that they want to go in the industry. So you have this kind of mentorship scheme, and alongside that, rather than it just being a kind of one-to-one type of an arrangement where you're just working with one person and learning from them, there is a huge kind of networking opportunity where there are really regular meetups, and you can go and be in a room with a bunch of industry professionals who are mostly women, but also quite often there's a lot of male allies there too, who also work with Rise. You kind of learn lots about the industry, lots about what other people are doing, and it's just a real opportunity to kind of make connections, because, I mean, to be honest, broadcast industry, you can be excellent at your job, and if you don't have connections, you don't get very far at all. So Rise is really looks at championing women through those mechanisms. And yeah, I was lucky enough to win a Rise Award a couple of weeks ago. The award was for technical operations, which was for kind of my work in innovation in studio automation, and the steps that the BBC has taken over the course of probably about 13 years that I've helped them work on to really push that sort of field of TV production forward, which allows us to make a lot more content than we would ever be able to afford without that side of the tech that we use.
Excellent, cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess now we'll move into the Q&A from the audience. So as I said, we will appreciate some more questions if you have any coming up. So that would be good. We've got one currently, which is less than none, more than none, sorry. The question here is, what is the best way of approaching companies for technical work experience in broadcasting? I'm not the best to answer that, really. So if anybody has any input to that, I'd welcome that.
I can answer very quickly for the BBC, which is just you apply. There is a portal, you can apply for work experience. The BBC obviously has to be very fair about how we do work experience. So there's just an application process, but those opportunities are there. So if you have a look at the BBC website, you'll find the way. But I think what Gareth has to say is probably a bit more interesting in this front.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I think with QTV, we've always been a sort of open door policy. You can send me an email or our HR department, or just the hello at qtv.media sort of general inquiries portal. We're sort of getting to a size now where we can't just have everybody in, whereas previously it was like anybody that was at the front door, just drag them in, street sweepers or bin men or whatever, just anybody in the door. We're still pretty open, and we do have a traineeship that is running annually, and it runs sort of in tandem with the football season, as that's our busiest period. So should be some form of intake in the sort of July, August period. Whether that will still involve our other partners, I'm not sure, but we are committed to helping to build the industry. But in lieu, as I mentioned before, we've ended up with 6 this year, which reduces our capacity to have other people in. But by the time you get to graduating, or if it's work experience that you're needing for a week as part of a course, we're absolutely amenable to that. But I would encourage you, and I can tell you this from experience of sitting next to them when they got them, if there's production that you're watching at home, pay attention to who the lighting director is, who the head of wardrobe is, who makeup is. Stalk them on LinkedIn, send them a message, and ask for any advice. It genuinely is about how much you want it and how much time you're willing to spend badgering people. There's limited places like QTV who have as an open door as you can, and even that is a very, it's a definite step towards sports broadcasting, although we do other things. And it could be a pathway to something else. But if there's something that you're interested in, whether it's music or whether it's children's TV or drama or whatever, pay attention to the credits and contact those people. They are there. Some of them will be friendly, some of them will be incredibly rude, and some of them just won't respond at all. But I have sat next to lighting directors who have lit everything from original series of Blackadder to the Rolling Stones in Cuba and things like that. I've sat next to them while they're receiving hundreds of emails from people saying, how do I do this? And they tend to give you the opportunity with a response and possibly an opportunity to shadow, or at least point you in the right direction. So that would be my advice.
Wonderful, thank you. Jonas, have you got anything on that? When you were a student, or before you were a student, did you sort of search around and get experience in places, or was it directly into the BBC and off you go?
So straight from A levels, I'd applied into the apprenticeship, and that was my route in. But I'd had some kind of relevant experience, I think, helped me with my application beforehand, that just came from volunteering at a local theatre, and an internship I did that was in like the energy sector, but it was kind of engineering and technical work, and having those experiences, I think, did help with my formal application once I got into that process.
Okay, cool. Go on, Gareth.
So just one other thing I would say, and it sort of follows on to what we were talking about earlier about be passionate about the thing that you're interested in. There's a lot to be said for getting experience and working for a company like the BBC or Sky or whomever. There are a limited amount of those jobs. But all of the software that we've mentioned is your conduit to doing it yourself. And most of the industry is self-employed. So I would caveat it all by saying, get as much experience as you can, but don't be scared of just doing it yourself. And, if there's something like a local production, say, I'll do that for this amount of money, and sell your ways. Like, yes, you probably have to start doing things for free, do that as your passion project, but take that experience and try and build your own opportunities as well as anything else, because that might just be a stepping stone to something else. But don't be stopped dead by not getting opportunities to work for somebody if you're interested in it and you have already begun doing that work.
Okay, wonderful.
One
There's a
thing
couple...
I just draw everyone's attention to is a Facebook group called People in TV :runners. And if you can get just some running experience, again, that will, as in TV runners, that's a great way to actually get in, meet people, but also find what direction you might want to move in once you're in the industry too.
Cool.
Yeah, sorry, I should say as well, like making contacts. I mean, I've sort of touched on it, but networking is absolutely your path into this industry, and doing running work or logging. Like, we have kids that, no kids, sorry, I keep calling kids, people that come in and they just are logging major events, and that is how most of our technicians have graduated. They started off doing logging, then they do watch and bet, then they're doing single camera coverage, then they're doing graphics, and it's a stepping, they're all steps towards the industry. You're not, nobody's coming in as a director of a documentary in the first instance. That's your passion project. But make contacts and be, and I tell you one thing, if you do get an opportunity, put your phone away. It is the bane of my existence. The number of, like, it is definitely a generational thing, and my wrinkles will attest and my gray hair will attest to it. But the level of frustration I have when I have young people in, and as soon as someone isn't talking directly to them, their phone is out and they're not paying attention. 100% of what makes you good at working in television is that you're watching the television all the time to point out any lighting error or a technical fault or a problem with graphics. It's all happening on the screen in front of you, not in the one in your pocket. And it is the height of a height of rudeness that, you know, particularly when you're training, that that your attention span is short.
Okay, cool. We've got a couple of other questions come through just before the end there. We've got another 5 minutes or so. Just a quick one, I guess. How well paid are these jobs in broadcast engineering?
So I can speak to that a little bit. We're an ethical employer, and we have a reasonable basic salary. But if you're starting as a sort of vision engineer, you'd be looking at starting salary of about 24, and then scalable up. And I think a sort of top level guarantee for a company like NEP or EMG are looking at sort of 65 K per annum, and then, you know, when you're moving beyond that, you're into sort of executive realms of the sort of 100,000 sort of. But, you know, there's a huge spectrum, and some companies pay differently. You know, it's interesting. We've looked at a lot of acquisitions of companies, and it's a sort of eye-opening of what we pay versus what other people pay, and I think, you know, we're in a sort of higher end because there's a premium that you have to pay for talent in Scotland, and we have to keep hold of the staff, so we pay well to keep talent, and I think probably should the same everywhere in the industry. You know, but the bigger a company is and the more appealing it is to work there, the more competition there is for the job, right? So you've got to weigh it all up.
Yeah, because it's nice to hear actual numbers. So much of the time, if you think about what young people have to face when they're trying to apply for their first job, they've not done anything in that industry yet. They've not had people openly talk about their wages and salaries. It's like not something that, you know, British people tend to talk about very much, quite frankly. And so, you know, whenever they see a job posting and it just says something like competitive salary, that's like a real bugbear for me, because what does that mean? Does that mean stop my life and go and do something, or does that mean, you know, how much should you put into that as a weight of effort, basically? You know, go and do an interview while you've got a job. It becomes a really difficult kind of equation, and people have to weigh it up. So I like it when they actually say the at least a range on the job.
Yeah, I think there's So I should say sort of traineeships, I would expect to be at living wage. And then, you know, 1 year out of it, when you've got a bit of experience and you're operational, you'd be looking at that sort of 24 mark as a basic starting salary, as a technical, like an engineer with technical skill and usable on operations. The other thing I would say is it's an interesting one, and it sort of speaks to that, you know, paying a premium for talent, is that, you know, there will be a salary within a company, and as I mentioned in my last answer, you know, there is an opportunity to be self-employed and build your value up on your own terms out with a company. So if you are frustrated by the career path, there is a massive industry of people who are self-employed, and it is a way to build your worth elsewhere. And it was something that, you know, you'll hear about it as you move in your career, but there's bubbles that you create for yourself when you have a comfortable job. And the BBC is you know, I grew up with my grandparents talking about, oh, the BBC is a job for life, and I went into that job expecting to retire from the BBC. But then as my career progressed and I became more and more frustrated, and it became a point where I just didn't know why I was doing it, and stepping away for 6 years increased my worth enormous, like in ways that I could never have comprehended, to then be able to, you know, there's a big bit of knowing your worth as well. And you can see that about the types of jobs you're doing and the experience that you're bringing to somebody, and that puts you in a position to bargain for a higher salary. But you don't have that opportunity if you just stay at the same place all the time, really. So
yeah, thank you. I think we kind of, we do kind of live in that sort of job hopping world now, don't we? It's that whole job for life thing is a bit old fashioned at this point. I think, to be honest, it's you know, you've got to expect to move about quite a bit. Okay, we are pretty much out of time, actually. So I think I'll draw things to a close here. Thank you very, very much for everybody involved in this, and thank you very much for everyone joining online. It's been pretty enlightening from my point of view, so hopefully everybody online got something out of it. And like I say, thank you to the panel for sparing the time and coming along. It's been very useful to hear everybody's opinions, and there's certainly some stuff there that I will take away in what I do in my job. So thank you very much.